Welcome back. Creating Dementia Solutions is our program. I'm Richard Pyatt. Glad you found us. Miles for Memories supports this program, and we talk very often about the goals of Miles for Memories, like movement, programming, and research. And you'll find that, of course, at milesformemories.org with a lot of other information and resources, along with the Facebook page for Miles for Memories, where you'll get alerted to these new Creating Dementia Solutions episodes, which in 2025, we've been focused on the Lancet Commission list of ways in which we can reduce our risk for dementia. Dr. Sean Field from Summit Point is back with us, clinical director at Summit Point, to talk a little bit about depression and dementia. Welcome back.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about what comes to mind for you when you hear dementia and depression. You put those two together, what comes to mind first?
I think one of the things that comes to mind really quickly is that there's about 40% of individuals that experience dementia who will also experience some form of depression in their lifetime. And that significant overlap obviously begs the question for us as practitioners, is there something going on? Is there a relationship between these two? And to what degree can we help someone if we support or address their needs in one dimension? Will we also get benefit or impact in the other? So if we intervene on the depression, will we see outcomes improving in those dementia features that are most associated with their condition?
Well, you can see how that question might come up. Now, it would appear that if someone receives a dementia diagnosis and they're aware of what that means, or they allow themselves to linger on that, depression could become a factor. Is that what you see most commonly?
It's a blend of things. So I would say yes, there are individuals that experience begin to become aware of their loss of function, or their loss of capacity, or their diagnosis itself, and it can produce a sense of hopelessness or loss with their long-term outcomes, or the likelihood of their living independent or successfully completing activities that they find meaningful.
Sure.
And you can find that would quickly potentially result in a pattern of behavior that would be consistent with what you'd see with depression, where there's an abandonment of preferred activities, disruption to your sleep schedule, changes in eating and diet and exercise, obviously. The other thing that we can see is that the symptoms and the experiences associated with dementia also produce changes in your ability to do the things that matter and the things that you enjoy most in life. And so it becomes a question of, how can I adapt and adjust to my new state, or in my new experience in the world? And so for some individuals, that's more challenging, and it can also, affect their mental health and their overall presentation, and how they feel or what they're experiencing joy from in their life.
Yeah, well, this makes sense, particularly given what you said in our last discussion, which was a key to, I don't know if alleviating is the word, but let's just use it, alleviating depression is doing the things from which we find enjoyment and engagement. If a person is not doing that, it can contribute to the depression situation if it's already there, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest challenges that people face is they get a diagnosis of depression or of dementia, is that there will be a gradual shift in how they experience the world and the degree to which they can interact with it, either independently or with supports. And those changes in their daily experiences and those daily activities that they used to find joy or derive joy out of can have a notable impact in their overall mental wellness and health, and becoming disconnected or lacking in their joy in some of those activities day to day.
So continuing to do those activities, if you can, is going to be key on a number of levels, it seems, even if now you're relying on a caregiver to help you do that.
Yeah, I think it's critical that individuals don't necessarily have to look at dementia or the the diagnosis of dementia as a sentence to no longer be able to do anything that you find value in. So to any degree that you can continue to engage in the behaviors that mattered, or that you can augment or change the way that you do those activities. Just because you might not be able to do exactly what you did before doesn't mean you can't do things that are still meaningful or closely aligned with what was valuable about those interactions. If you enjoyed going on hikes or engaging, maybe there's different forms of exercise where you can also get to see the outdoors or potentially have interactions with your friends that you used to walk with. So even if that progression does cut off specific activities, there are opportunities for you to seek different ways to express those activities that matter to you and different ways to achieve them, which could be through that of a caregiver or finding new outlets to engage with.
As we prepared for this discussion, you made a point of the significance of underscoring the difference between depression and dementia. That might not be obvious that we need to do that, but elaborate on that if you would.
Yeah, I think for a lot of individuals, when you start to look at the profile of depression and dementia, there can be some immediate symptoms that seem to overlap and can be hard to pick apart. So you can find that there might be limitations or struggles with speech and engagement with others. You might identify that there's a lack of movement or engagement or motivation to move around. And those could be overlapping things that you might say, oh, it's hard to tell which one's which. So it really becomes the question of picking apart, is this dementia or depression, comes more to the overall the behavioral movements themselves, so the physical presentation. Depression might come with just less activity overall, whereas when someone who's dealing or struggling with dementia or one of the multiple different types of conditions of dementia, you're going to see different progressions of those physical movements and inability to necessarily perform them in the same manner they could. Individuals with depression don't have physical limitations from their depression. They just engage in less activity overall. Whereas with dementia, your ability to actually express and engage in those activities is diminished in some regard.
I'm not asking for statistics here, but would you say there is a greater incidence of dementia, or depression in different dementia types?
The link with depression and dementia is more pronounced with certain conditions or versions of dementia.
Okay.
So specifically thinking of Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. Both have higher rates of depression as co-occurring condition, and depression is also more likely a predictive factor of the experience of those two forms of dementia as well.
So what's the approach then for a professional like you when, let's suppose, there is an Alzheimer's diagnosis and you've been asked to address the depression factor?
So there are a number of different ways that you can intervene, and thankfully a lot of times the supports for depression, regardless of the presence of the dementia, can be consistent with what you would do with anybody else that might be experiencing those symptoms. So engaging in therapy, the use of medications, there is some additional considerations that are taken into account with prescribing, just to ensure that there's balancing between medications that might be used for dementia and their associated features, as well as the depression itself.
Makes sense.
And then there are other overlapping activities that can support both the dementia and the experience of the dementia, as well as can be ameliorating in terms of the experiences of depression. Things like cognitive stimulation therapy, where individuals are essentially given a variety of activities and programming that encourage problem solving and complex thought, which can help stem the effects of dementia long term, as well as be a stimulating and enjoyable activity from a depression lens to increase those activities, as well as reminiscence therapy, where you help individuals experience and have recall with social and environmental contexts and cues to help them maintain their connection with their memories.
Yeah, I'm interested in the first thing you mentioned in particular, because could that be as simple as, say, working a puzzle? Is that the kind of stimulation?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's really anything that prompts or promotes your engagement in problem solving. So it could be spending your time doing the crossword puzzle or a Sudoku each day, or just finding different ways to stretch and exercise the mind. The more activities that you can do, it'll of course increase the length of you continuing to have those capacities, and then it also brings activity and joy to your daily life, so it can ameliorate some of those experiences that you have with depression as well.
We spent a fair amount of time in our last discussion talking about therapy. Can therapy help when dementia is a factor?
Yes, I mean, therapy can be helpful. It's often recommended, especially at the early stages of diagnosis, for individuals to seek therapists. So knowing that your life has a different trajectory than you might have planned, and knowing that you will experience different changes in your overall function over the coming years, it can be really helpful to seek out engagement with a therapist early in that process, to start to build those strategies and techniques to navigate those changes that you'll experience, and to build strategies to prevent yourself from maybe experiencing greater levels of depression or sadness beyond that of receiving the news itself.
Sure. And as dementia progresses, does therapy continue to have a role if depression is part of this or not?
It really depends on the individual's overall presentation and the stage of the illness progression. As long as the individual is able to engage and participate with different therapeutic interventions, the problem solving, the stimulation therapy and reminiscence, those really depend heavily on an individual having the ability to still engage in those thought activities and problem solving. So as some of those skills might deteriorate over time, it's less likely that therapeutic intervention for depression from a therapist or counselor perspective would be recommended or supported, but you would still find that you have course of treatment and support from your psychiatrist to use some medications or pharmacy approaches to treatment.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing we haven't even talked about is the idea that therapy might be useful for a caregiver in a dementia situation, and that probably is part of it too, that you see.
Yeah, I think it's fairly common, especially as we see individuals coming in for treatment and getting support. Their caregivers are right there with them, and so the hills that they have to climb, the struggles that they're facing, it's not just that individual, it's the others that are around them and providing that support and care that are feeling some of that burden and some of that difficulty. And so we do recommend that caregivers attend closely to signs of burnout or stress in association with being a caregiver, as well as ensuring that they stay healthy, and that they're able to provide that care and support long term as they continue to wish to do so. And so we do encourage that caregivers attend to that closely and seek treatment and support as soon as they start to identify any struggles or issues.
And I presume that caregivers might come to an appointment with the person for whom they're caring, a therapy appointment, but I think what we're really saying is they might need to avail themselves of therapy on their own.
Yeah, it's likely that the therapist would encourage that they spend some time one-on-one and not necessarily have that third party in there.
Sure.
There is relationship or therapies, couples therapy, where you might have that three-person dynamic, but you likely will experience that a caregiver would be asked to engage in that resource or support individually.
Mm-hmm. All right, so someone's listening to this, maybe they know someone with dementia and maybe they've displayed some depression as well. What do you recommend they do if they haven't taken a first step? That's sort of a
I appreciate
segue there. Yeah.
I think it's important that if there are concerns noted, if there's any idea that there might be something going on, I'm struggling with experiencing and navigating the world in a way that I didn't used to, or I'm noticing that a loved one is, the best thing you can do is just start asking questions from the trusted professionals that you might engage with. Reach out to your primary care office. You can always reach out to Summit Point. We have our First Step, which is our 24/7 psychiatric urgent care on 175 College Street here in Battle Creek. If you're not sure, our best ask of you is to please just start asking questions and reach out, and then we will help you navigate different resources or care points that you can access.
All right, that's where we'll leave it. Dr. Sean Field is the clinical director of Summit Point, the behavioral health authority here in Calhoun County. We appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Milesformemories.org is a website that you'll want to bookmark so you can take a look at resources there, dementia-related resources, technology that has just grown leaps and bounds in recent years, and I mean just a few years, that can be especially helpful. Have a look, milesformemories.org, and follow us on Facebook at Miles for Memories so you know when these episodes come available. Creating Dementia Solutions, I'm Richard Pyatt. Take care.